If you Google the top 3 smartphone manufacturers right now, you'll find that Apple, Samsung, and Xiaomi are at the very top. So, how do their flagship phones actually compare? Well, here I've got the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, the S25 Ultra, and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and me and my team have been putting these through some serious testing, from their design and materials, to their display and brightness in various different scenarios, to their cameras, performance, batteries, and so much more, in order to find out which one is the ultimate 2025 flagship. But before you start this comparison, if you're looking for the ultimate protection for your S25 Ultra, you can get that with Spigen's range of cases and accessories. Find out more later in the video. Okay, so I want to start off with their design, as they're all very different and iconic in their own way. The iPhone has this recognizable triangular camera module that Apple has been using since the iPhone 11 series, with a really smooth frosted glass back that I'm a big fan of. The frame is made out of titanium, and it also rounds off a bit towards the edges, which does make it quite comfortable in the hand, whilst also being super grippy. The S25 Ultra also comes with a very recognizable design that Samsung's been using since the S22 series now, with its vertical camera style bump. It's also got a very smooth frosted glass back, just like the iPhone, and also a titanium frame. Now, it is more squared off, both in terms of the frame and also in terms of the corners, which I do overall find to be less comfortable compared to the iPhone. And then we've got the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, which has its own recognizable design that hasn't really changed since the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, with its gigantic circular camera module right in the middle. Now, unlike the other two, the Xiaomi does actually not have a titanium frame or even a glass back if you go with a silver chrome color at least. Instead, you get this dual tone look that kind of resembles a classic photography camera. The back part here is made out of faux leather, while the silver part is actually made out of plastic. And I gotta say, using the 15 Ultra definitely feels the least comfortable to me out of the three, as that huge camera module, whenever I'm trying to use it, it gets in the way of my fingers, so yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this. So comfort-wise, I would say that the iPhone 16 Pro Max is the best, followed by the S25 Ultra, and then the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. Although design-wise, for me at least, the Xiaomi 15 Ultra is definitely my favorite. I absolutely love that dual-tone look and that centered camera module, but that's just me. I'm definitely curious to hear your own preference down below. Also, if you're looking for the widest range of colors available, we've got 3 with the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, 4 with the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and 7 with the S25 Ultra if you order from Samsung's online store. Which brings me to their displays. And honestly, these are some of the very best displays that you can find on any smartphone right now, with excellent color reproduction, very smooth 120Hz refresh rates, always-on functionality that actually keeps the wallpaper visible at all times on all of them, and super high brightness levels as well. But there are some differences between them. The S25 Ultra and the iPhone have the biggest screens at 6.9 inches, while the Xiaomi has the smallest at 6.73. Although, when it comes to watching content, the S25 Ultra is by far the best, as not only does it have a super small front camera cutout as opposed to the much larger dynamic island on the iPhone, but it also has those more squared off corners, which do give you slightly more screen real estate. Now, both the Samsung and the iPhone have a fully flat display, whereas the Xiaomi has a curved display, one that also has the thickest bezels out of the 3. Personally, I do prefer the way a curved screen looks, although here I have to go with the iPhone and the Samsung, as the Xiaomi doesn't curve enough to see any content on that edge screen. In fact, most of the curvature is taken up by its bezel. Which brings me to their brightness. On paper, the Xiaomi has the brightest screen at 3200 nits, as opposed to 2600 on the Samsung and 2000 on the iPhone. But in real-world usage, this story is very different. As you can see here, the Xiaomi is actually the dimmest, followed by the iPhone, and then the Samsung, which is the brightest. And this is why you should never take the advertised brightness values at face value, as those usually refer to the peak HDR brightness on a small window, rather than the full screen brightness that you'll actually get outdoors. I should also mention that the S25 Ultra has a matte display coating, which drastically reduces reflections outdoors. Now, this is also why the S25 Ultra is noticeably more visible than the other two. Now, if we take a look at their HDR brightness indoors when playing a video, they're all stunning here, with some super bright and vibrant colors. Although here, the Samsung and the Xiaomi do seem to be a bit brighter than the iPhone. And it's also worth mentioning that if you watch a lot of content at night, the Samsung can go dimmest, followed by the iPhone, and then the Xiaomi, which is actually the brightest one here. Now, the Xiaomi 15 Ultra does support 1920Hz PWM dimming, which means that its display flickers much less compared to the other two. So if your eyes usually hurt after using your phone at night, then this should not happen with a 15 Ultra. Also, Xiaomi is the only one that can show up to 68 billion colors as opposed to 16 million on the other two. And if you go into its display settings, you can also tweak a ton of things, such as switch between sRGB and P3 color space modes, and even tweak those further. Although, weirdly enough, when I tried viewing a P3 image, only the iPhone displayed it correctly. The Samsung did as well, but only in its own browser, not in Chrome, whereas Xiaomi did not, no matter which browser I used, despite it being set to its display P3 color space. Surprisingly, the Xiaomi was actually the brightest in this case, and that was also the case when I was reading content. It's just strange that this does not apply when watching HDR content or outdoors. So overall, I have to give the display win to the S25 Ultra, as for me, outdoor visibility is the most important, which combined with the fact that it's also got the biggest display with the thinnest bezels, just makes the S25 Ultra absolutely incredible for viewing content. Which brings me to their cameras. And here, on paper, the Xiaomi 15 Ultra has by far the best specs. It's got a massive 1-inch main sensor, as opposed to the much smaller ones on the S25 Ultra and 16 Pro Max. And from the teardown videos, you can literally see just how gigantic the sensor is. It's also got dual telephoto modules, just like the Samsung, but its main telephoto uses a gigantic sensor, 200 megapixels resolution, as opposed to the 50 megapixel on the Samsung and the 12 on the iPhone. And this telephoto is almost as big as the S25 Ultra's entire main 200 megapixel sensor. Xiaomi has also collaborated with Leica to use their lenses for increased clarity and reduced reflections. This phone is kind of like a camera that just happens to be a phone, whereas the Samsung and the iPhone are both the other way around. In fact, the camera island on the Xiaomi is so massive compared to the other two that it almost doubles the thickness of the phone. And just take a look at how much it makes the phone stick out when laying flat on a table. But okay, specs are one thing, the result is another. So let's see how they both compare. But okay, before we find out which device is the best here, let's open up this super special package from Spigen. Okay, first of all, take a look at how cool this packaging looks. And inside we get, oh, take a look at this. The Ultra Hybrid MagFit Neo 1 case is back, and this is actually the first time this has come to the Galaxy series. Such a stunning looking case, just take a look at that. Okay, so let's see what's underneath. And oh, this is the classic Ultra Hybrid MagFit Zero case. I don't even know which one to pick between, as these both look so good. Let me know which one is your favorite down below. Okay, next up we've got what looks to be the brand new Valentinus MagFit card wallet. This has now been redesigned and improved for the S25 series, and it simply snaps on like that. Super easy and very, very secure, as you can probably tell. And the final thing in the box seems to be Spigen's brand new Tough Armor AI MagFit case. And really, a major reason why I do recommend these cases is because of Spigen's MagFit, which makes mixing and matching accessories so easy. So if you guys want to try out any of these awesome cases for the S25 Ultra, check out Spigen by using the links below. Starting off with the main camera, the biggest differences are in terms of the sharpness and the color. Zooming into the grass, the iPhone and the Xiaomi capture the most detail. It's also worth noting that the iPhone shoots at 24 megapixels by default compared to 12 on the other two. In terms of color, Xiaomi is the most vibrant, Samsung is in the middle, and the iPhone is the least vibrant. Overall, I do prefer Xiaomi's result here, although the window is blown out, whereas on the Samsung and the iPhone, they both handle the exposure correctly. In this other shot with more drastic lighting, the iPhone crushes the shadows, losing quite a lot of detail, while the Samsung and the Xiaomi handle the exposure much better. And between the two, I do prefer Xiaomi's result for its greater detail and lower noise. If we take a look at a close-up shot, all three phones have fairly large sensors, which means that we do get this natural depth of field without having to use portrait mode. However, Xiaomi's 1-inch sensor provides much stronger natural depth of field, and the image is also cleaner and with less sharpening too. Here's another example which clearly shows this difference. The Xiaomi has a very clear focus fall off in both the foreground and the background, while the other two phones, especially the iPhone, keeps almost everything in focus. Moving on to night shots, they're surprisingly similar, with the iPhone being the brightest. Now, if we zoom into the house, the results are almost identical, which is a bit unexpected given Xiaomi's very large 1-inch sensor. Now, the Xiaomi does have less noise in the sky, but the fence, for example, the details here are the best on the iPhone and actually the worst on the Xiaomi. And the Xiaomi does also show noticeable lens flares, despite its Leica lenses, which are meant to reduce reflections. And there's an even bigger difference in this example. The iPhone and the Xiaomi are brighter, while the Samsung is more contrasty, which I do personally prefer. Now, zooming in, the iPhone has the least detail, Samsung has more, but it does look over-sharpened, while the Xiaomi looks to have the most natural detail, although the difference is not as big as I expected. So main camera-wise, the Xiaomi is the best one overall, especially when it comes to daytime shots and when it comes to its depth of field. But the difference is far less noticeable at night, which is a bit surprising. Moving on to the telephoto modules, at 3x, the Xiaomi captures the most detail, followed by the Samsung, and then the iPhone, which is not the best, as it does lack a dedicated 3x module. Moving on to 5x, the images are closer, but when we zoom in, the iPhone does lose a lot of detail. Samsung is a bit better, and then the Xiaomi, this one stands out with the least amount of noise. It's also got the most vibrant colors, and also a bit of natural background separation, which is really good to see. At 10x, the differences are even larger. The iPhone is very noisy, the Samsung is better, and then the Xiaomi is definitely the cleanest, with superior colors as well. At 20x, all phones process heavily, yet Xiaomi remains the best, although it is slightly over-processed. At 30x, the Xiaomi is still superior if you take a look at the lamp details, but the Xiaomi does capture the tree trunk way better. So how do their telephoto modules fare at night? Well, at 20x, the S25 Ultra does perform the best. Samsung's heavier AI processing does make a significant difference compared to Apple and Xiaomi, both of which tend to process images far less. Same applies to 30x, with the S25 Ultra once again leading, although surprisingly the iPhone this time around is not that far off. Although Xiaomi is, which is very strange. In summary, the Xiaomi has the best telephoto during daytime, but the S25 Ultra excels at night. Moving on to portrait mode, when it comes to people portraits, they've all got some very good background separation, as they were all able to individually separate my hairs. Although Samsung and Xiaomi were slightly better here. As for the color and the detail, there's just a massive difference between the three. The iPhone being super low res with completely messed up colors, the Samsung's much better, although my code does look blue here, while the Xiaomi is far better and also more detailed if you take a look at the tree. Although my face is a bit too saturated for my taste. For pet portraits, they're all good. Samsung has the best edge detection and also with clear separation of Ren's hairs, while Xiaomi has the most appealing colors to my eyes. Now, if we take a look at object portraits, the iPhone looks lower res compared to the other two and also lacks any depth compared to the two. Xiaomi captures the most detail, but interesting enough, Samsung provides the strongest depth of field, which I think was probably just achieved through post-processing rather than the more natural depth of field that we've got on the Xiaomi. Moving on to their ultra-wide modules, Xiaomi once again comes out best. The iPhone looks overly sharpened and washed out. Samsung is slightly better, but Xiaomi delivers much cleaner images with more natural detail and also better colors. On top of that, Xiaomi also leads when it comes to its dynamic range. We can also see a pretty big difference in dynamic range between the three in this image as well, with the Xiaomi being the best. At night, they're all pretty poor, with the iPhone's image falling apart completely here. The Samsung's is quite blurry, and then the Xiaomi is the most detailed, although it is quite dark. In this brighter night scene, all of them perform much better. Xiaomi has the most natural detail, although I do prefer Samsung's processing here, as some extra sharpening does actually help in this case. As for macro, Samsung and Apple use their ultra-wide modules to achieve it, while Xiaomi uses its 3x telephoto. And here, while you can get closer with the other two, the image quality coming out of the Xiaomi is just night and day. The colors, the details, everything really. Although you do have to be very careful with the Xiaomi because if you're too close to the subject, then the image will be out of focus and it will end up looking blurry and definitely inferior to the other two. If you are careful, then it will look really nice, although I would say if you want consistently good macros, then the iPhone is the best one for that. As for video, they're all very good here in 4K 60. The iPhone tends to be the brightest, and the Xiaomi is definitely the least processed and the most natural looking. But I'm pretty sure you'll all be very happy with either of them here. They can also all do 4K 120, and here, the iPhone does seem to have the best dynamic range with much more shadow detail than the other two. And while the Xiaomi does look pretty good here as well, it does soften its detail quite a lot in some parts. Samsung and Xiaomi can also shoot in 8K 30, which does give us a lot more resolution to play with. for cropping in. And here, I do prefer the Xiaomi's more contrasty look, although Samsung's footage does appear slightly higher res. All three can also shoot in log, although I do find the iPhone and the Samsung to offer better dynamic range, especially the iPhone, whilst also being a bit clearer than the Xiaomi. As for night video, I was really surprised to see that for the very first time ever, we have a phone with a better low-light video performance than the iPhone. And that's of course the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. As you can see here, the noise is reduced and the entire image is quite a bit clearer than the iPhone's is, with the leaves being more defined, and the same goes for the ground texture. That one-inch sensor definitely makes a difference here. Moving on to their front camera, the images are very similar in daytime, with the Xiaomi having the widest angle. Color-wise, the iPhone's actually the best here, as it's got my coat looking black as opposed to the other two where it's more washed out or even blue in the case of the Xiaomi. As for detail, they're all very good here, although the S25 Ultra seems to have the most natural detail here. If we switch to front night, there's just a massive difference between the three. Just take a look at how much clearer Xiaomi's photo is, whereas the other two are very blurry. So yeah, massive difference here. But of course, camera quality also matters, and here I do prefer Samsung's and Xiaomi's. Both apps are quite minimal, yet feature-packed, whereas Apple's has duplicate settings, sometimes forcing you to go into the system settings just to adjust formats and resolutions. Overall, Samsung's camera app, especially its powerful and easy-to-use expert RAW mode, is my favorite. Xiaomi's interface, especially the Pro mode, feels a bit too crowded, whereas Apple's literally lacks a Pro mode entirely. But alright, if you want the best camera out of the three, then that is definitely the Xiaomi. Although, surprisingly, that was mostly in daytime shots, as in nighttime, it wasn't actually always the best. Which brings me to their performance. And here, the Xiaomi and the Samsung are basically identical. As in, they both come with the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip with 12 gigs of RAM, which can go up to 16 if you buy at least the 512GB model of the Xiaomi or the 1TB on the S25 Ultra. The only difference being that the S25 Ultra comes with a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy chip, which is a slightly higher clocked version. At least if we take a look at the performance core cluster, this runs at 4.47 GHz as opposed to 4.32. And this definitely shows, with the S25 Ultra scoring 6% higher in single-core performance and a pretty significant 12% higher in multi-core. The iPhone, on the other hand, comes with Apple's A18 Pro chip with 8GB of RAM. And while its single performance is the highest, its multi-core is actually the lowest out of the three. But okay, with that being said, how do they each perform in day-to-day use? Well, in Genshin Impact, they all run extremely well, essentially at fully maxed out graphics on all of them, and none of them break a sweat. However, the iPhone does have one major advantage here, which is that it can actually play Genshin Impact at 120 frames per second with all the settings set to max. The other two phones are limited to 60. And on the iPhone, we can also play true AAA titles like Assassin's Creed Mirage, Resident Evil Village, and many more, none of which are playable on the other two. We've also tested video editing in Premiere Rush by exporting our OnePlus Watch 3 video in 1080p 30. This took the iPhone 1 minute and 20 seconds, the Xiaomi 2 minutes and 57 seconds, and surprisingly, the Samsung 3 minutes and 35 seconds, despite having the overclocked 8 Elite chip. Now, for my own day-to-day use, I much prefer using the S25 Ultra. Literally everything I do on this phone just feels buttery smooth, and I haven't had any performance issues whatsoever. The Xiaomi also feels great, but I'm just not a big fan of their HyperOS skin. I much prefer Samsung's One UI. As for the iPhone, iOS 18 on the 16 Pro Max for me has literally been a nightmare. Constant bugs, camera freezes pretty much on the daily. I'm not even kidding when I say that this is the buggiest phone that I probably used in the past 10 years. Like, it's literally that bad. So for me, the S25 Ultra is my pick when it comes to the overall performance and just how it feels to use it. Which brings me to some features that are unique to each phone. For the Xiaomi, that's this photography kit. So this is a $200 accessory that gives you a camera grip, plus a number of controls for switching between lenses, also for recording videos and taking photos, and you can even install an ND filter or a polarizer on the front here if you want. So yeah, this thing is actually really, really cool. The Samsung's most unique feature is, of course, the famous S Pen, which lets you draw or take notes, and guess what? It is also free. You do not have to buy it separately. Although personally, I haven't really used it. I always kind of forget that it's even there. Well, the iPhone surprisingly has the most unique features, from Face ID rather than the fingerprint reader on the other two, to its dynamic island, which shows you important app updates at a glance, especially so for Uber rides. We've also got a capture button for quickly launching the camera and also controlling it, although the controlling part is basically a gimmick for me, as using the touchscreen is always way faster. And then we've also got this programmable action button that you can set to do pretty much anything. As for the speakers, here's a quick test. To me, the S25 Ultra sounds the loudest, but the iPhone and the Xiaomi have the richest sound. Slightly richer on the iPhone, but let me know your thoughts as well. But okay, these are all 2025 flagships, which means that AI is a huge part of their experience. So which one has the best AI features here? Well, right off the bat, I have to say that Apple's by far the worst here. Siri is just as bad as always, since that big contextually aware Siri update has been delayed until 2026 or even 2027. And other than that, we just get the usual AI features like writing tools, voice transcriptions, and just all of that generic stuff. Your cleanup tool is just as bad and barely even works, and while we do get some unique AI features like Genmoji, Image Playground, and Notification Summary, the only one that I find useful is Notification Summary. Samsung and Xiaomi, on the other hand, are a completely different story. They both have Gemini, which is years ahead of Siri at this point. Gemini Live also lets you speak to it in natural language, which works extremely well as well. And on top of this, their image editing features work very well too, especially Samsung's, which has the best cleanup feature I've ever seen on a phone. Xiaomi's is almost as good, and it does have some extra options like removing reflections, expanding the image without the need to crop it like you have to on a Samsung. You can also replace the sky and also do a couple of more edits, all of which work really well. So overall, I do actually prefer Xiaomi's AI over the other two. As for the battery, the Xiaomi has the largest battery at 5,410 mAh compared to Samsung's 5,000 and Apple's 4,685. From my usage, they all lasted for a full day of use, but while the iPhone would die at the very end of that day, both the Xiaomi and the Samsung could be pushed until mid next day. Samsung and Xiaomi also have the fastest charging to around 70% in just 30 minutes as opposed to around 50% on the iPhone. As for wireless charging, the Samsung is the slowest here at 15 watts, the iPhone supports 25 watts if you use Apple's own MagSafe charger, while Xiaomi supports 80 watts as long as you're also using Xiaomi's own first-party wireless charger. Oh, and if you're looking to give your new devices a fresh coat of paint, the best place to look is in our app wallpapers, where we've just dropped Rings Ripple by our latest designer Bold, which makes any device look incredibly premium. We've also recently dropped Round Reflections by Atif, which is both vibrant and minimal for that low-key aesthetic, while Heavenly Hills by Ali is more dreamy, which I think it suits tablets and desktops perfectly. There are more amazing packs coming in March and a massive backlog for all of you to enjoy, so feel free to download wallpapers for over 1,000 high-quality 8K wallpapers, and you can try the first designs in any of these packs for free. So that's over 150 free 8K wallpapers by using the links below for iOS and Android. But okay, having said all of this, which one should you really go for? Well, you cannot actually buy the Xiaomi 15 Ultra in the US. So here in the UK, the Xiaomi costs £1,300, and that's for the 16GB of RAM model and 512GB of storage. The S25 Ultra costs $1,250 for the 256 12GB of RAM, or $1,350 if you go for the 512, whereas the iPhone costs $1,200 for the 256 or $1,400 for the 512. So if you really need a 512, then the Xiaomi is going to be the cheapest, but if you just want to get the base versions, then the iPhone is going to be the cheapest. As to which one you should pick, well, if you are a mobile gamer, I would definitely go with the iPhone here. If you care massively about the camera, then that would be the Xiaomi 15 Ultra, although that's mostly in daytime and not nighttime. And lastly, if you want an incredible display for viewing content, especially outdoors, that's where the S25 Ultra shines. But yeah, let me know which one is your pick down below. Check out our app wallpapers for some awesome designs like this one behind me. And yeah, stay tuned for the next one. I'm Daniel, ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.